Hey, fourth graders, Miss Emick here, and ready to roll into lesson 6 on becoming a word detective today. Now, as we already know, our remote learners, thank you for watching the video or coming to our Zoom today. Don't forget to have your student toolkit, that's that student binder, ready to go with those packets in there, so you can follow along with our reading lesson for today. If we do end up posting a Google slide, don't forget you can hit the present button to help view it a little bit closer and larger. And of course, come join our Zooms, and we're happy to help complete the work with all of us today. Now, new goals. What is this? So we already know here that we are working on nonfiction texts. So just to review, yesterday we learned about 3 remaining text structures. We talked about comparison, which is looking at similarities and differences. We looked at problem solution, which is what you guys even completed for your exit ticket as well, on what the problem may be and how they can go about solving it. And then, of course, look at that cause and effect relationship. If this is what's happening, then what is the outcome? Okay, so today we're going to kind of review back on new vocabulary words using context clues, and how in nonfiction we even have some text features that may help us out with some of these vocabulary words. So, when we're trying to figure out here, solving the mystery of a word's meaning, we know that nonfiction writers use lots of very specific vocabulary words in their texts in order to help readers learn more about a topic. Now, sometimes readers of nonfiction come across new words with which they're unfamiliar with. And when this happens, guess what? You got to act like a detective to figure out the word's meaning. And when reading nonfiction, there's several ways that we can solve the mystery of a word's meaning. For example, we can use context clues. We can maybe look at our background knowledge, but there's this great text feature as well that we can also use a glossary, which is usually located in the back of the text. Now, if you're following along in your reading toolkit here, we have our strategies listed out here on that page, and then how we can go about using it. So these are just a few of the tools that we can use to help us solve a word mystery. One tool we can focus on, that we're actually going to focus on today, is using word parts. And many words are made up of common parts that also have their own meaning. So some of the words only have one common part, while others are combinations of several parts. And the cool thing about knowing the meaning of these different word parts is that the meaning of the parts, it never changes. So when we recognize a word part, we can use our background knowledge of that part to solve the word mystery. So that's what our focus is going to be. I know we've talked so much about context clues. We're going to continue looking at our background knowledge, but looking at those word parts is what we're going to be doing today. So there's hundreds of different word parts, but these 4 are the ones we need to be on the lookout for today, because they are going to help us solve word mysteries in our text, Oceanography, the Study of the Oceans. Now today, we will be detectives, and we will use the strategies to solve word mysteries as we read the text. Now, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to read chapter 3 to you, the 5 oceans here. Okay. And as we are reading, I want you to listen for one specific word that we're going to talk about here. And the word that we're going to talk about is going to be this word here first, salinity. As you're listening, we're going to figure out what this word salinity could possibly mean. All right, so Mrs. Emick is turning to page 17, listening for chapter 3, the 5 oceans. 5 oceans make up the Earth's largest bodies of water. These include the Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, Arctic, and Southern oceans. The Pacific and Atlantic are divided into northern and southern regions. The Southern Ocean is the most recently named ocean. It was named in 2000 and includes the water surrounding Antarctica. None of these 5 oceans is completely surrounded by land. They flow into one another, forming one enormous body of water. Salt everywhere. Oceans contain salt water. Much of the salt comes from the land. Rainwater runs down mountainsides, and it washes across plains and into rivers. The water picks up salt from the ground along the way. Eventually, rivers carry the salt into the ocean. Meanwhile, the sun heats the ocean surface. This causes the water to evaporate into gas and rises to form clouds. Most of the salt is left behind. Saltiness, or salinity, is measured in parts per thousand or ppt. The ocean water salinity is about 33 ppt. This means that every 1,000 pounds of seawater contains 35 pounds of salt. This is far too salty for humans to drink, but it does not bother the ocean animals. Their bodies filter out excess salt from the water as it enters their system. Now, as we're trying to figure out here with the word salinity, you're going to notice that when you're following along, the word salinity has actually been bolded. It's darkened, which means that it must be some kind of important word. Okay, so if my word here has been bolded in my nonfiction text here, then that must mean that I could possibly locate it in the glossary. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out here of my presentation so that we can see what strategy would help me. Now already I know in context clues it said saltiness or salinity is measured in parts. So I know it has something to do with salt, but it's been bolded, so I know I can find it in the glossary. I flip to the back of my book here, and on page 46, I can see my word salinity, which also says saltiness. All right. So, like you said, when I look up the definition, I can use those context clues. What do we think that word means? Salinity. What did I say? It is saltiness. Good job. Now, like I said before, even though I notice that this word is bold, which means it has to be listed in the glossary, I also notice that it is has one of our word parts here. Oh, excuse me. I'm getting ahead of myself because that word I'm going to talk about here is going to be this word right here, photosynthesis. So we have to keep on reading and listening for that word photosynthesis. Temperature and pressure. Ocean temperatures cover a wide range. Surface waters in the Arctic and Southern Oceans are icy cold. Surface waters in the Southern Pacific and Indian Oceans are quite warm. Rain, wind, and the sun's heat affect the water temperature at the surface. But deep down, the sun's warmth fades away. Wind and rain have little effect. The water gradually gets colder. At the deep ocean floor, the water is just above freezing. Pressure also increases as you move deeper into the ocean. On land, we don't notice it, but the weight of the atmosphere presses down on our bodies. And in the ocean, water also presses down. As a diver descends, the amount of water above the diver increases. Therefore, the pressure on his or her body increases. Divers work at extreme depths wearing special suits. They're built to protect their bodies. Sunlight. I hope you're listening carefully. On land, sunlight falls on mosses, ferns, and trees. Their cells use the sun's energy to change different chemicals into food. This process is called photosynthesis. Ocean plants do the same. Sunlight filters through the water, reaching tiny floating plants, and sunlight also shines on strains of seaweed. These plants carry on photosynthesis to live and grow. So like I said before, I was getting ahead of myself here. I do notice this word is in bold, which means that it would be in my glossary, but I also notice that it has a word part here that we looked at earlier, photo. So let's go ahead and try using that word part to help us out. Well, what do we remember about photo? Let's go back for a second. Okay. We know here that photo has something to do with, what did it say? Light, right? So what did I read about when it talked about photosynthesis and light? Let me reread. Their cells the sun's energy to change different chemicals into food. So it's using that sun's energy, isn't it? So like I said before, I know photo means light. So therefore, this word must mean the process, right, of how we're using light to make our own food, how plants use the light to make their own food. Good job. So again, I can go back to the glossary just to triple check myself because it has been bolded and the definition says a chemical process by which green plants make their own food. Now, we have a lot of great ideas for solving this word mystery, and knowing that word part really has helped us out finding the meaning of the word photosynthesis. But, you know, Let's continue on and see what other words we can find. This next word here that we're going to look at is the word microscopic. Okay, let's listen carefully as we get to that word. Surprises on the ocean floor. Part of the ocean floor is completely flat. This is called the abyssal plain. A chain of volcanic mountains rises from the plain. Some are active, with hot rock and ash flowing from them. Others have been quiet for centuries. Many of these mountains are among the tallest on Earth, and some reach well above water, creating islands. On the go. The ocean is never still. At the surface, waves are whipped along by the wind. On quiet or breezy days, the waves are low and calm, but during storms, the winds stir up huge violent waves. Some of the most powerful waves occur right after underwater earthquakes. These deep sea jolts are such a shock that they can produce waves hundreds of feet tall. And these waves are called tsunamis. And we talked a little bit about that in science, I know, last week, okay, with those plate boundaries. Tides are slow movements of the ocean, of the entire ocean. They are seen along any shoreline, and the water takes hours to creep up the shore. Then it takes hours for the water level to rise again, fall again. Currents are rivers in the ocean. They are areas where the water flows in a specific direction. The wind and the earth spin are two things that can produce these currents. Amazing sea life. Here we go. We're going to get into microscopic. Let's listen for it. The oceans are home to some of the most unusual organisms on Earth. Some algae have tiny air-filled balloons that help them float near the water surface. The mimic octopus pretends to be a sea snake, a poisonous fish, or a jellyfish to escape danger. The blobfish floats above the sea floor, waiting for a slow-moving prey to drift by, and the clownfish finds safety among the poisonous sea enemies. All sea creatures depend on one another for food or protection. The small but important, the upper layers of the ocean receive the most sunlight. Billions of microscopic plants and animals live in this region. These organisms, called plankton, depend on water movements to wash them around. The tiny plants use the sun's energy to produce food. Well, if you go back here to what we looked at with word parts, I had that word micro right there, didn't I? And I know that micro means what? It means small, doesn't it? Okay, so let's read that sentence one more time. It says, billions of microscopic plants and animals live in this region. So if I'm going to use that word part and we describe them as being microscopic, we're describing them as being what? Micro means small, right? So therefore, if I'm saying they're microscopic plants and animals, then they must be really tiny to see, right? Maybe I may even need to use a microscope to see them. All right, friends, you're doing awesome. Let's continue on. I've got two more words here as we wrap things up. I have bioluminescence. Bioluminescence. So if I look at that, those breakdowns here, bio I know means light. Let's see if we can figure this one out together. Bioluminescence. I'll flip over to that page here as we listen to that word. Living lights. What do animals in the deepest, darkest waters do if they need light? They may make their own. This is known as bioluminescence. The bodies of bioluminescent animals contain a special chemical, and it combines with oxygen to produce light, like the blue and the comb jellyfish. So again, if I'm going to use my strategy as far as using word parts, and I know bio means, what did I say? It means light. Ooh, not life. Silly Miss Simic. Let me add that in. Light. Okay. So if an animal has bioluminescence, they're able to produce their own what? Their own light. So my definition, the production of light by living organisms. All right, friends, submarine. Let's go back to our chart here. Talking about that part here on sub. If something is saying it's a submarine, then I know it has something to do with being under. Being under what, though? That's my question. All right, so let me flip over here to Chapter 5, New Discoveries, New Questions. Scientists are constantly working to learn more about the oceans. Some are looking at the deep sea floor. They've discovered hot springs there. The water bubbles up from deep inside the earth. Amazingly, giant clams, spider crabs, and tube worms live nearby. Some scientists are learning how these organisms can stand such heat and what they eat. Other scientists are building better equipment for studying this unusual environment. So the submarine's windows are built to withstand great pressure. So scientists are using these submarines to examine these living creatures here that are so far down in the ocean. So again, if I'm going to use this word part, sub meaning under, I'm under what? What is it under? So if scientists are using a submarine, then obviously they're going under the what? They're operating under the water. Okay. All right. Awesome job, friends. So, we're going to read many different pieces of nonfiction throughout our study and throughout our lives. And as we read and discover exciting new information, we're probably going to come across new and unfamiliar words. After our reading today, we know that we don't know what a word may mean. We can use tools that we've learned to become word detectives. And as detectives, we can use these context clues or word parts or even our own background information and the glossary, which is a great text feature to solve this word mystery. This will really help us as readers of nonfiction to better understand and enjoy every piece of nonfiction that we read. So friends, today, what I want you to do, my face-to-face, what I like to call my roomies here, I'm going to give you a passage on the Great Fire. However, my Zoomies and my remote kiddos, I want you to go into your Scholastic News. You're going to fill out your Google Doc on some new words that you may encounter and those particular articles in your Scholastic News. All right, friends, I hope you enjoyed today. Let's continue to be word detectives and look for some new words that we can become familiar with. Until next time.